Hello and welcome, everyone. It's the Transform Your Relationships live show. I'm Laura Rubenstein here with Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. Hi, Rhoberta.
Good morning, Laura. Exciting morning. I don't know why it's exciting, but I just feel like excited. So something's in the air.
Something good is in the air, but we have the buts. Today we're talking about those butts.
And particularly, we're talking about the yes, but phrase.
Or I know you do, I know I do this, but, or I know
I
you
know
do
you
this.
don't like this, but I know
I'm
you don't
going.
want to talk about this, but
What's up with the butts, people?
yeah, I think there's a whole thing where we believe that if we paint something red and say I acknowledge it, that it exists, then by saying I acknowledge it exists, I'm somehow exempt from whatever is the boundary around it.
And it somehow it's the tool or tactic of some to say you got boundaries, and I don't care because I'm going to do what I'm going to do anyway.
Right.
And then that's the but, because I notice in general when you use the word but, it's like, so I know you want to do this, but you just negated everything, like you, but I don't really care is what they're saying.
Right, right, exactly. I know this bothers you, but I have to bring it up. Okay, so basically, you're telling me that you're okay with bothering me and you're okay if I get bothered. And underlying that is that you really hope I don't get bothered because now you've said you know. So somehow we're deeply intimate and that doesn't hold for our relationship. So I can get under your skin and mess around in there and you're not supposed to get irritated. And it's just such a thoughtless thing to do, you know? And yet it's so very, very common with people who don't have boundaries. They don't like boundaries. So they create a false sense of closeness with some statement. They may not be a closeness or even a false sense of closeness in your relationship overall. But with that statement, they create a false sense of closeness. I know you well, and therefore now we're besties, and therefore it's okay for me not to play by the rules you set.
Or that's my excuse for not playing by the rules, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know you have these boundaries, but I'm not going to pay attention to them, is the meta message, is the underlying message. It's quite, it seems like they're now excused from acknowledging boundaries. Now, you said something interesting I want to ask you about. You said something like they are people who have no boundaries. Do they not have boundaries, or do they just not respect boundaries, or is it both?
It's very much both in many cases. They don't have any and they don't want other people to have them, or they don't have any and they don't recognize that those boundaries are real. But there are people who don't feel that they can have boundaries, that they're needy and they want to be part of a relationship regardless, so they'll take a lot of guff. um, and then there are people who want to be in relationship by association. Like, I have a friend who likes to associate with me. She doesn't relate to me, she doesn't care about who I am, and I use the term friend where I should use acquaintance. um, but she wants, my definition of hijackals. Hijackals are people who hijack relationships for their own purposes, and then they relentlessly scavenge them for power, status, and control. So she wants to believe by being with me, she has inherently the same status I have.
Mm.
And we have to watch for that. So hijackals have no boundaries. Um, they have, well, I shouldn't say that. They have things that they get very incensed about, but they're not really boundaries. But they will never ever believe you have boundaries that they can't negotiate or trample,
Mm.
because you don't matter. You are just the means to the end of getting what they want.
Right. That's and it, So when I hear someone say something like, I know you blah, 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 but, or you don't like this, or this bothers you, like you said, or you have, a calendar. I know you've allocated this time for me, but I want to cringe. I'm like,
Yeah,
you
what's
know,
coming?
it's like, but you don't care about them, and you're choosing not to respect them, and I feel like I have to like say, okay, be zen about this, and say, but they are my boundaries,
Yeah.
and they are my boundaries.
The and is important. And you can even go a step further and say, I'm really glad you understand my boundaries.
Mm. And I cringed when someone told me I had a boundary,
Mm.
that they know I have, because I don't want it to be related to like a boundary. It's just a structure that I use in my life that works. And, and it was feeling not good to that person.
Hmm. Well, I think that there is a response that could be changed in what we're talking about, which is, I know you have this boundary, and which is what we always want to replace the but with. And I'm wondering if there's any way that we could negotiate this. That's respectful. Say, I acknowledge that this is what you've told me and I've learned about you. And I'm wondering if there's any wiggle room over here. And when you do that, you have to be willing to hear yes or no.
Hmm.
Problem is that somebody who doesn't honor boundaries and uses the but thing is only willing to accept yes, and then they're going to make you wrong for the no.
Right.
So emotionally mature people don't ask questions that they're not willing to hear yes or no to. They may not like the yes or no, but they
Hmm.
are willing to hear it and deal with it. People who are needy or desperate or hijackals, they only want one answer and the other is unacceptable. And they'll make you wrong for giving them the answer that they didn't want. and and so it's a no-win situation all the way around, because then you have to make decisions about those people in your life.
Right.
And that's troublesome because it's an added pressure, it's an added thing to do, it's an added emotional energy leak.
Mm. And if you can relate to this and you're watching us and you want to share or ask a question, feel free to do so on Facebook. We're at Transform Your Relationships Live on the page. We're also on a watch party here, so I'll keep an eye out for comments. So yeah, thanks for the likes. Appreciate you being here, Christine. Awesome.
Yes.
And there's things like, I know you do this, but I don't like it, or whatever it is. But it's like, I know I can be bitchy, but that's
Yeah.
another,
Yeah.
thing. It could be like, I know I can be this way. Oh, but I'm so sorry, or,
Well, that one, let's talk about that one for a minute, because sometimes that is an entry point to something that is very vulnerable. I know I can be bitchy, but sometimes I just don't know what to do with it. There can be an entry point to asking for help, you know, um, because when we acknowledge that we have something that we see as a shortcoming, we can be in a vulnerable state. So we have to be able to determine, is this person coming to override or coming to be vulnerable? And sometimes that needs a little calibration. So it's not the kind of thing that we jump on and go, oh, here we go again. It may be like, oh, so this is a tender space for you, and you're taking me into a place of maybe you have a question or maybe you need some help. So we need to be able to calibrate that. But I
Mhm.
think, the reason that we came up with this is because we hear so many times that people would rather ask forgiveness than permission, right? They'll go ahead and trample over our boundaries and then say, oh, I know, but I was hoping that it would turn out differently. Well, no, no, it doesn't work like that. Boundaries are non negotiable. Don't bother setting a boundary that's not non negotiable with a person. The boundary may be one way with this person, and it may have some wiggle room with that person, but those are different. It's not like, can I override your boundary? I mean, you can ask a question for sure, but not override it,
Mhm.
ignore it. trample it is the way I think about it. And the reason, I do a lot of graphics, and one of the graphics that I have is that trampled grass rarely sustains, right?
Mhm.
So if you keep trampling over things, eventually they get beaten down and they don't respond, and they're not, the grass is not beautiful and green and happy and vibrant again. It's trampled. And we have to be careful what we're doing in our relationships, because we trample on boundaries. Then the other person's uncomfortable having us around, and they don't feel safe. And that damages the relationship. So we try to be smart about it, try to be wise about it, try to be caring and compassionate about it. And in all things, those big three that I talk about all the time, mutuality, equality, and reciprocity. If they're not there, we're not going to have a healthy relationship.
And I think the changing of the words in our own language from but to and is helpful, because then we're more respectful. I understand you're concerned, and I'm concerned too, or I have a need. And then it's like, okay, now let's have a conversation of equals, like you're saying,
Right.
versus I know you have a concern, but mine's more important, and the
Yeah.
subtle subtext there, or but I'm really upset about it, or, so if we just change the wording, can you live with that? Bless you.
Oh, excuse
Bless
me.
you. So, and then, back to that, I know I can be bitchy, but that's who I am. Excuse is, if you accept it, because those of us, I who make accommodation to it, then we're allowing ourselves to be that pressed down grass, I think.
Hmm.
So, they've copped to it, and they've basically said, you
And
know,
I'm going to do what I want.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And you're either going to accept it, or we're done. Like it's like, and you're going to accept it, basically, is what this said.
Hmm. Well, I can give you an example from my own practice. The other day, a person that I had been helping redevelop a relationship with an alienated adult son, we worked really, really hard to get some understanding, get some conversation, to understand the give and take and all of that. And then she did something that was really upsetting to her son. And so then he wrote and said he was upset. And her response to that was, well, thank you for sharing. Like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Well, that's kind of the flip side of saying, I know that you'd prefer this, but I'm going to do whatever I want to do. And in this case, it was, I know that you have feelings about this, and I have every right to do whatever I want to do, and you can be upset as you want. Well, if that is the case, and as I said to the person, okay, now I'm confused. You said you want to heal the relationship with your son, and you behaved in this way, which is true. You can do whatever you want, or you want to heal the relationship with your son. You can't have both, right? It's not going to work like that. So that's kind of the meta model of what we're talking about. If you're going to say, yes, I want a relationship with my son, but I want to do whatever I want to do. Okay,
How
that's
does
not going
that work? Yeah.
to
How does that work again?
work. It
My way
doesn't.
or the highway kind of thing.
Yeah, like, well, you can have feelings and thoughts and all of that, and I don't really care, but I'd like a relationship with you because I'm opportunistic and I want you to do what I want you to do, and I want you to be how I want you to be, and I want you to give me access to the grandchildren and everything just because you should, but I can behave any way I want, and you should be accepting of that. Like, that's crazy making behavior. Absolutely crazy making. And when I called it, she was like, what do you mean? Now, boy, we got a lot of work to do yet.
We do. It's amazing how sometimes we can't see ourselves,
Well, we can't. We
and
can't.
we can't help ourselves. But if, these conversations that we have are hopefully enlightening to people, oh, like I've done that before. Maybe I can put in the word and instead of but. Maybe that will shift my thinking and help me be more considerate of other people. If you know that that's an area you want to improve in, or get better at relating in, because that's what we're here about, transforming your relationships live
In
in
the
real life,
moment,
in the
in real
moment,
time.
in
Yeah.
real time. I mean,
Hmm.
what are the buts in your life that we're using, all the time? And when are they being used on you? And I really think it's something that people use to make excuses for themselves and not being willing to change and be more
Hmm.
respectful of other people. And they use on others to manipulate.
Yeah.
So,
It's sloppy. It's
yeah.
sloppy thinking.
And it's damaging, like you said, because it's hurtful to a relationship. Relationships are sacred. I mean, if you want this richness, juicy, they're sacred. They're a safe place. And if someone's going to trample on a boundary, it's no longer a safe space. It's no longer a relationship. It's a kind of a defense mechanism now you're
Hmm.
in.
Well, a couple of years ago, I'll give you an example from my own life. A couple of years ago, I had a friend, I was very sick, and she said, I'm not coming anywhere near you because I might get it. I said, I don't have anything contagious. She said, well, that was the way that she made sure that she didn't come by to see if I'd starve to death. And later on, about 6 months after that, she never did come by at all to help in any way. And I was bedridden, but that was okay. That's the way she showed me who she was. But then about 6 months later, she did something completely outrageous, to my opinion. So I said, I didn't care for that very much. And her response was, I don't want you as a friend anymore. That was such a relief to me because there was really no friendship going on. But the thing was that if it wasn't all her way, then it wasn't going to be at all, right? That you couldn't be called on anything. And as I said to her, if friendship cannot sustain getting through a rough spot, there is no friendship there. It's a transaction. And I
Mm.
said that to her when she said, I don't want to see you anymore. I said, well, that's fine, but why? And she said, well, you said that about me and I don't like it. And I said, okay, but 20 minutes before that, you told me that you loved me. I'm confused. You love is I don't believe in unconditional love. That's conversation for another time. But um,
Another note.
if you have a friend and you have history and you've been close and you've been safe to be vulnerable and you've talked about a lot of things and they know a lot about your history, you have a kind of bond that's elevated to a certain point. And if you can't say something like, I felt very dismissed when you did this, which is what I said to her. And she was like, nobody talks to me like that. I'm never going to speak to you again. And I said, no, a friendship can weather things. But what we're demonstrating here is that it isn't a friendship. And I had apologized. I said, if you if I said something poorly, I apologize for that. I went through the what I felt was appropriate to apologize for, what I felt was worthy of an apology. But that's those are hallmarks of recognizing that in this case she was a covert hijackal, sitting there with a poor me, nobody should talk to me like that, nobody should find a moment's fault in everything that I do is perfect sunshine and light. Well, no, none of us really fall into that category. You need to be able to say what's so. And how many times have I said this? The genius of good communication is to be able to be totally kind and totally honest at the same time.
And it's totally possible.
Totally possible. But you have to work at it. So I love what the point that you're making, with that if you do the yes and consciously, what you're doing is you're rewiring yourself to say, oh, this is different.
Ding, ding, ding. Yes.
And it will automatically change what comes after it, because when you can just get over that hump to say yes, and you find yourself saying things, I prefer this, or what could work better is this, and you find yourself being solution oriented rather than problem oriented.
And that's where we want to come from in relationship. We want to create that safe space. We want to keep true to ourselves, and we want to be kind, in the process of communicating. What I heard in your story was fear on the other side, and that fear was running the show, and that if she did anything wrong, it was earth shattering. And if you brought that up, she couldn't be with that.
Well,
So,
that's hijackal behavior.
right.
That's how they are. They're
And they
brittle.
lash out and they hurt people because of that fear. But they're
That,
so fragile that they have to like lash out.
yeah. And I have to say, it was such a great relief because I had been endeavoring to just pull back and I was, still not recovered. So I wasn't planning on doing anything major about it, but it happened. And, it's been great. I'd not had to caretake that relationship for another moment or be concerned in any way about how to bring it to a equitable conclusion. It
Right.
happened. But I think this brings up another important topic that we may need to talk about in some depth. They say that people come into your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And how do you determine when a season is over?
Mm.
How do you just recognize that both of you, maybe one person will recognize it earlier than the other, but to make that be okay, that we're not in each other's lives forever in every case, and that maybe there are things that take us apart and that we don't have to make them wrong. We just have to know that, oh, this season is over.
And sometimes there's a conversation that happens and sometimes it just fades away.
That's right. And it's okay. And this whole another idea I don't believe in, closure. So you know,
It's a
that
buzzword, at
well,
this
it doesn't happen. I mean, do you ever have closure over
closure
somebody
happens
dying?
here
Yeah, yeah, but you don't have closure. I mean, it's not like all of a sudden that goes out
completion.
of your head and you never think about it again because you have closure. Closure usually means I need an answer I haven't got yet. I need to know why this happened. And there are many things you will never know why they happened or why somebody died or why they got hit by a bus or why they don't like you anymore or whatever. You will not know. And no amount of talking about it will give you the answer either. So, big things to talk about closure and unconditional love for another day.
Yes. Oh, I have a big story I want to tell you about closure and how yes, it brought up we will do definitely talk about closure and there's a lot in that because when do we need closure? We need it to
Mm-hmm.
move on and we
Now,
can control it. So,
I just want to add to this before we have our big conversation for those people listening today. It's not like the conversation can't add to a good ending to something. I'm not suggesting that by any means. Sometimes you can have a conversation, something ends in anger and upset and drama, and you want to know in quiet ways, could we just talk about this?
mm.
If that's what you mean by closure, I'm all for that. But to think that, there's going to be some catastrophic thing where, they're cataclysmic. Now, finally, I'm going to understand why the world does this. No, you probably won't. There are things that are mysterious and there are things that you will never know.
But there are ways to come to peace with it.
Yes, yes. So, topic
So
for another
I
time.
think that will be our next topic. And I feel complete with the topic of the buts. Is there anything else you'd like to say about using but versus and
Yeah, I'd just like to say this, get off your butt and use and.
get off your butt and use and. And Joe, I hope it's been wonderful. We are here. You are welcome to message us with your comments. And Susie says, everyone has been my teacher when the lesson becomes the gift, especially when that happens. Yes, thanks, Susie. Uh, everything can be definitely a great learning opportunity, shall we say, and that's a great approach to life.
It is. What can I learn from this?
Yeah.
I'll add one more thing. People tend to go down rabbit holes of negativity. And what I always encourage people to do, and in some of my books I write about this, is the best thing you can do for yourself is to catch yourself when a relationship or something doesn't work out or something goes slightly wrong or you want something and you can't have it. Instead of going down the rabbit hole, catch yourself, just like you're going to put and instead of but, catch yourself and say, for what might this be good?
Mm,
Just stop that moment and say, maybe there's a grand plan here. For what might this be good? and you will take yourself to new places of understanding and learning, as opposed to down the rabbit hole of ain't it awful and he done me wrong, right?
And I gotta retaliate or be a victim or I can't recover from this. There's another topic for another time is resilience. And
Sure. I
and
think we've talked about that before, but it's
oh
always
yeah.
good to revisit.
Yeah, we can revisit it in the context. But yes, speaking of other videos, we've done a ton of them. We have lots here on our Facebook page at Transform Your Relationships Live. So please let us know what you love. And if you have topics that you want to hear discussed here, feel free to message us. We're here for you.
Absolutely. And all of our Transform Your Relationships Live are on my YouTube channel for relationship help. And so if you have questions of me, and if you have questions of Laura, and I put it in the comments, if you have questions of me, come on over to the YouTube channel. And every Monday night at 6 p.m. Pacific time, I do a live stream.
Nice.
Ask your questions if you have relationship questions. Ask them over there, particularly if you're in a relationship with a pesky hijack. You
Somebody
know,
who's relentless,
yeah, last night,
chronically difficult.
every Monday night we have a topic that starts the conversation, and then it just goes wild in the chat and I answer questions. But for example, last night's topic was hooked on a hijackal, how to let go,
Mm,
right? Just get the conversation started
right.
and talk about that. So there are lots of resources for you. In particular, 2.5 years of our shows are there for you. So
So
many
you
topics.
again that you can go to directly to your website too, or the YouTube channel for relationship help, right?
Right.
Either
Yes.
way.
Yeah. And be sure to subscribe when you're at the YouTube channel so you'll get the notice when there's a new video or when there's a new live stream.
And I work with people in business and with the Feminine Power Cards. You can find them at femininepowercards.com, and my blog is at transformtoday.com.
And Laura is an amazing hypnotherapist. So if you have things you want to talk to her about that are business and or life, good thing to do.
Want to start using and a whole lot more? Let's work on it.
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, Roberta, it's been great. Thank you everyone for watching. And we're here on replay. We appreciate you watching the replays too. Bye for now.
Bye.